In the book 1984 by George Orwell, the party changes history to better fit its ideals by censoring and deleting information. In the modern day, billions of people have access to more information than our ancestors ever dreamed of. To most, the ability to access vast amounts of information is a useful tool, but to others, it's a threat. China's government is one such example of those who perceive this as a threat. The government and President Xi Jinping uses what is known as the Great Firewall of China to restrict their citizens from widely accessing the World Wide Web. It is a combination of technology and laws that force citizens to comply. They use techniques such as packet inspection and IP banning to filter what users may see. In addition to automated censoring, 100,000 people are employed to manually delete posts, similar to how Winston deletes history in 1984. Outside information is heavily restricted and monitored, just like in 1984. In China, not only are many popular websites banned, as shown here, but the Chinese government has gone as far as creating their own version of the internet, where disapproved events are removed, such as the Tiananmen Square tank ban. This rubbing out of important historical events can be compared to 1984. In 1984, some master-brain in the inner party would select this version or that, and then the chosen lie would pass into the permanent records and become truth. Another way the Chinese government censors websites is by forcing companies to self-censor, usually by creating a whole separate version of their website. This alternate version of the website doesn't contain topics and information that would normally be censored. Companies comply to this under threat of being banned and potentially losing money. One such example is Facebook. Chinese authorities will permit a localized version of Facebook with censored content and perhaps limited overlap with the international. Not only does the Chinese government censor information going in, the government also censors information going out. One very recent and life-threatening example is the coronavirus. The first case was reported December 8th. As the disease spread, Wuhan officials insisted that it was controlled and treatable. The police questioned 8 people who posted on social media about the virus, saying they had spread rumors. The government then proceeded to publicly release misinformation, similarly to how the party does. Wang Guangfa, a prominent government respiratory expert, told the state broadcaster China Central Television on January 10th that the Wuhan pneumonia was under control and mostly a mild condition. Even worse, when a group of Hong Kong journalists went to the Wuhan hospital that took in most coronavirus patients, the police detained them for a few hours. They were asked to delete their TV footage and hand in their phones and camera for inspection. Later on, a reporter named Miss Lu Qiu wrote an article for QQ.com, the news site owned by the internet giant Tencent, about the measures the Hong Kong government has taken in dealing with the virus. The article was deleted 10 hours later. The implications of these events are obvious. Almost nothing the government doesn't want is allowed through the Great Firewall of China, both in and out. Even further, the Chinese government has taken to silencing or publicly punishing those who disagree with them. Dr. Jiang, the military doctor who became a whistleblower in 2003, has been put under periodic house arrest and forbidden to visit the United States to collect a human rights award. He is also portrayed as a bad role model. A multiple-choice question posed by a test prep school in 2017 asked about Dr. Jiang's decision. The correct answer was B. It was wrong because it harmed the interests of the nation, the society, and the community and should be subject to legal punishment. This public humiliation and imprisonment serves as a way to show others that there are punishments for not agreeing, and also as a way to ridicule Dr. Jiang's decision to whistleblow and thus reduce the number of other whistleblowers. This method of silencing can be compared to the public executions in 1984, except in using this method, there are no markers. All these examples are relatively recent and becoming more and more frequent, and it is clear that the Chinese government is determined to protect and maintain the Great Firewall, and make sure only government-approved information gets through. They have recently made another popular method of bypassing the Great Firewall illegal: VPNs. VPN stands for Virtual Private Network. They hide your location by tricking computers into thinking you are somewhere else, such as a place where there is no internet censorship. In China, VPNs are illegal to buy, sell, or use. A man in China has been sentenced to 5.5 years in jail for selling software that circumvented the country's pervasive internet censorship controls. This law makes it illegal to access information not controlled by the government. There does remain some resistance, however. 31% of internet users in China use a VPN. In 1984, inter-party members know what's actually happening outside and have access to real information. Authorities have issued a disciplinary warning to a Guangdong man and ordered him pay a fine of 1,000 yuan, or $164, for setting up an unauthorized virtual private network service to connect to international websites. In both cases, there are people who live above others in terms of available information and global access. The Chinese government inflicted no punitive action besides a simple fine, one that many people would gladly pay to have access to the global internet. Just as inter-party members in 1984 have access to outside world information, the upper class in China do too. Those unfortunate enough to not be able to do the same are constantly monitored. Every day, millions of WeChat conversations held inside and outside China are flagged, collected, and stored in a database connected to public security agencies in China. It is impossible to organize any form of resistance or even communicate in China without the government knowing what users are talking about. There is constant surveillance and no privacy online. In this way, WeChat functions similar to the telescreens in 1984. People unsuccessfully fight the censorship. A recent example is the Hong Kong protests. As Hong Kong shows, mainland China's pervasive attempts to disrupt and discredit the movement globally have highlighted that China is not above trying to extend its reach beyond the Great Firewall and beyond its own borders. The number of censorship cases and similarities to the world in 1984 only accumulate. All the examples shown in the video so far are from the last 2 years. There seems to be little hope of this total censorship ceasing in the near future. Some chances for change include total government overthrow or government evolution, both of which seem unlikely. In the case of a government overthrow, normal citizens of the People's Republic of China will band together, outpowering the government through the force of numbers and determination, replacing the government with a new leadership. In the case of government evolution, there are 2 possible ways this could happen. First, President Xi Jinping could resign, die, or retire, allowing the successor more benevolent to take his place and undo the Great Firewall of China. This method requires a successor willing to undo Xi Jinping's policies and have sufficient political influence to take control. Second, protests could become more frequent to the point that President Xi Jinping is forced to change his policies. This method requires normal citizens to be united in opposing the Great Firewall and the censorship that comes with it. They must publicly express their displeasure repeatedly and on a large scale, enough that the government cannot simply shut down the protests using violence and erase the entire event from history, just like Tiananmen Square.